Hi, my name is Alessandro Gangelosi and that's a video tutorial coming from cgcookie.com for Max Cookie. This time we are trying to start another new interesting tutorial series, and they're talking about again Cebas software, and this time we'll start to introduce Pyrocluster. Pyrocluster is a volumetric plugin, really useful to create effects as smoke, clouds, fog, fire, and a lot of other interesting things. Pyrocluster can be bought and installed as a standalone plugin, or it is part of the final render 3.5 version for 3ds Max. So it is a really amazing plugin because it is really complete and has a lot of features really useful, and it is also compatible with Final Render, the Scanline rendering engine, and it has a complete support of Mental Ray. Obviously, it works perfectly with all the standard plugin about particles in 3ds Max, and I'm talking about the standard particle system, the particle flow, and also the thinking particles from Cebas. So let's start to check how it works. We'll introduce how to play with it, and we'll start to talk about every single feature step by step. So first of all, you can find the plugin there inside the environment as the other atmosphere plugin, and you have it there, so you have to click on Add, and you see that you have there Pyrocluster 3 and Pyrocluster 3 Mixer. So we'll see how we have to use these two steps. If we select Pyrocluster 3 and we set to OK, let's close this one. You see that there we have the entire interface for Pyrocluster, and it's really complete, and we have a lot of interesting features we can use. So obviously we can render it using the rendering engine we like, but there are some things that can be used using Final Render, and I mean, for example, the global illumination for the volumetric particles. The first thing we need to work with Pyrocluster is a particle system. So let's go there and let's start playing with really simple things. So I go there, I select the particle flow source. We can rotate this particle flow source to have the the direction there up, and if we see the particles, you see that it's really fast, and we'll try to do a simple particle system to do something with Pyrocluster. So first thing, I like to emit particles from the pivot. Then we need to have less speed, a little bit of variation there, and we have a little bit of divergence. So you see that's our smoke, and let's go with dots. We have no rotation actually, and then I like to have a drag force there, and we go also for a wind, maybe something going in this direction. So back there in the particle system, and we need first of all a force. We can cover the rotation, and the first one by list will be the drag. So we have to change the particles there. We have the emission until 100. You see that the speed is still really high, so we go for something less, something like 0.5 and 0.2 for the variation, and you see that now it is slower. Maybe we can have a little bit less force. Let's try with 700. Okay, and after a while I'd like to delete the particles. Let's say maybe 50 and 15. So you see, after a while we have the particles getting away. Obviously I'm not working on a really a realistic simulation there. It's just to have something to work on. And then I like to have also the wind, add by list, and we select the wind. So that's the wind. Obviously it's really high. Let's go for 100. It is still too high. Let's try in this way. Let's see, now it is a little bit slower. We can delete the particles later. Let's go for 75. So we'll have particles for more time. Okay. I'd like to have a little bit of turbulence inside the wind. So let's add, you see, a little bit of turbulence and a little bit our little scale, and we need also a little bit of frequency. So you see that it is using let's go for the local. Okay, something like that. And we can have maybe a little bit more damping. Let's go for 7 and 7 and 7. So you see the particles slowing down after a while. Okay, so now we have the particles, but we need the volume. And talking about the particle system, I like to select the PF source, properties, and you can remove from visible to camera, or you can do another things, and is to set to 0 the scale of the particles, so you'll have no particles inside the rendering. Then let's go to set a light, and we can go with a target direct, and let's say something like that. And I can move it. Okay. And we can have also a plane under the particle system, just to have the possibility to project the shadows. Then we need to change a little bit the hotspot parameters, and we have also the overshoot, so we have the complete illumination there. And we have now the basic stuffs we need. So let's go there and let's save the scene in the right folder. Let's keep in Dropbox. Okay, and we'll have 3ds Max, particles, and we call it Pyrocluster introduction. Let's copy the name in there. We save the scene. Okay. So now the first thing we have to do is to go inside the environment. And the first thing you see is the particle and the lights. So in this area we have the possibility to select the particle system we have to use for Pyrocluster, and the lights we'll use for illumination. Let's start with the first thing, the particles. You see that we have nothing inside the selection actually. And then we have 3 buttons. The first one is the pick particle system. So that's the way to select the particle system. Then we have the remove particle system. So if we have, let's create another particle system 2. Let's go for a sprite. Okay. Let's imagine that we are selecting the particles. Let's start. I pick the PF source, and then you see I can select also this one. So inside the list we have the PF source and the spray. If we like to remove the spray, we can select spray and press the X button, and you see that now we have just the PF source. Let's select the spray and cancel. Let's make another thing. We have the selection over the plane, so another object inside the scene. Let's go back in the environment, and you see that we have another button, really useful, simple but really useful. And I mean, we are talking about the edit particle system. So you have an automatic selection, you see, of the particle system you are selecting inside the list, and you see that the selection was changed from the plane to the particle flow source. So you see it's really useful to use this particle. Now let's see what happens if we try to render with a scan line. Let's go with our final resolution, 900 and 400, and let's lock the image aspect. Let's render. And you see that we have the plane, and we have a black stuffs there, and we have the smoke, but we have no illumination. So you see that we have something but no illumination and no shadows there. So let's see what we have to do to have something more interesting. Let's go there, and the first thing, we need lighting. Obviously, if you have final render and you are using the global illumination, there is a way to say to Pyrocluster to use the global illumination, so you can use the skylight and the sun directly to illuminate the smoke. Let's go there, but we'll start with a really simple setup. So let's pick a light, and you see that now we have lighting. Obviously you have all the remove lights if you are selecting more lighting source, and you have the edit light to select the light from there inside the scene. Let's render again. You see that actually we are still no illumination. The first thing you have to do is to go there, and you see that inside illumination you have no illumination enabled. Let's set to enable the illumination, and let's see what happens. And you see that we have now a white smoke. So you have to remember that to illuminate the Pyrocluster, you need to set to on the illumination, because that's the only way to shade the volumes. So for the moment we don't need to understand how to use the stuffs. We need just to start working with the various tools there. So what do we have there? Another interesting thing is the shadows. You see that actually we have no shadows inside the scene. You see that inside the illumination we have a shadows panel there, and we have the cast shadows, receive shadows, and self shadows. The first one is the cast shadows, and that means that you have the possibility to cast the shadows over the ground. So let's set to on the cast shadows. Let's render, and you see that actually we have no shadows, still no shadows inside the scene. So the first thing we have to check is the light. Let's select the light, and you see that we have no shadows. So first thing we have to set to on the shadows. Let's try to render, but you see that we have still no shadows inside the scene. That's really simple because we have no objects inside the scene, and we can check the shadows if we put, for example, there a teapot. You see that the shadows are set to on actually. So what do we need? We need to say to the light source that we like to create shadows from the atmospheric effects, and you see that there in the shadows parameters we have the atmosphere shadows. You can set to on, and then if you render you see that we have the shadows there. So that's really simple. So actually we have the shadows for, let's remove this teapot and let's save the scene. You see that we have the shadows on the ground, but we have no shadows on the smoke. So you see that there we have the receive shadows, and that's useful when you have some objects inside the scene and you like that the shadows coming from this mesh will be applied to the volumetric effects, but actually we have no stuffs inside the scene, so what we need is the self shadows. So that means that we like to have the shadows from the smoke over the smoke. So let's set to on the self shadows, and you see that we have an illumination there. Now it's not important the quality actually, but it's just to see how to play with the stuffs. To have a better visibility, let's introduce another light just to fill the illumination. There we can remove, we can say that this light will simulate in any way the sky color, and there in the advanced effects we have no specularity for this light. And actually if we render, you see that we are illuminating there, but we need to say to use this light also for the volumetric effects. So we have to go back there and pick this light. So let's render. Oh, sorry, I have to check. We have to try again to pick the light. Okay, now we have it. Let's render, and you see that we have the illumination. Obviously it's really high, so we have to go there and say, for example, 0.4, and you see that it is less, we have less power, and we can have a lower value. You see just a little bit of lighting, and we can change also the color, so going to the blue, something really dark. And let's see, you see it's really useful, visible. We can remove and go there to have a darker color, just to give a little bit of lighting. Okay, so you see that it's also really fast to be calculated. So go back there and we check the first panel, and you see we had the particle and the light. Then we have some information about the quality there. You see about the properties for the volumetric and the rendering, with some information about the quality, but we are talking about a more complex series of parameters, and we'll talk about it in a coming tutorial. Let's go to see some simple things, as for example the color. You see that we have there some colors and a lot of tool, and the color 1 obviously gives the color to the smoke. So if we set, for example, that to the gray, you see that the smoke starts to be gray. And we have also the possibility to set some variation and the coloring. So let's say maybe just not so much 0.5, and we are introducing some variation of coloring. So you see that we have some colors coming out. We can also say to have more variation. So you see that we see more color variation inside the smoke. And that's interesting because it gives us the possibility to have a color, but also some variation inside the volumes and inside the color to give a more realistic result. So other things you see there, we have the luminance. So we are setting how much lighting we have inside the color. Obviously, if we have a luminance set to 100, you see that the shadows are not so really visible, but it's really useful to have some kind of special effects. And let's see what I mean. For example, let's set there another color. So we have two colors, and the second color will be, for example, a red. Let's render, and you see that we have this color there, and let's say we have also this color. So let's say that this one is yellow. So you see that we have three colors. We have the red there, we have the yellow, and we have also some point of gray there. We can go for a more strange color using, for example, the green, and render again, and you see that we have there some point of color. So you see we can mix three colors, but we can also decide, for example, that this one, the yellow, has a complete self-illumination. So you see it's really useful to simulate, for example, burning stuffs as the fire. Let's set back to 0, and you see that we have a color mixer to mix these three colors, and we have the distance and the density. If we set the density, obviously you see that the mixing of the color is different, and we'll see in a future tutorial how to use this mixing and how to introduce the position. You see that we have the position there, and we have the variation for every single, and we have also the possibility to use a material there. So you see that we have a lot of possibility there inside the colors, but obviously we'll see more in depth how to use it to create more complex stuff. Now I'd like just to introduce you to the usage of that stuffs. Other things we can see there for the moment, it's just to see that if I press over a circle there, you see that we have an effect editor that give us the possibility to control all the parameters and all the characteristics of the smoke, and creating some interesting things, and we'll see how to use it in a more advanced tutorial. Okay, let's go back to something like, let's say, maybe a white color, maybe we have a gray color as this one, and then we have also a really dark color as this one. Let's see what we have. In this way, you see that we have some colors inside the smoke, and we can use, for example, the density just to have a better representation of our smoke there. So other interesting things just to use the plugin is that, for example, there you see that we have the possibility to load settings and save settings. You see that I can press there, and we can save the preset in a Pyrocluster file format, so you can save this preset and reload on another scene using the load settings, and that's really useful because you can have a database of preset to create smoke, fire, clouds, and all the other things you can do with Pyrocluster. Another interesting thing is the preview. So you see there we have this icon, the open preview, and we can have inside a little viewport the preview of just one particle volume. You see that we have there the possibility to see how the effects change at the birth of the particle and at the death of the particle. So we have the entire life to see how it will evolve. Obviously, actually, we have no animation, no changes during the particle life, so we see nothing. Other things we can do is to have a background there to see the transparency over the colors, or to choose a background color as this one, for example. We are selecting, let's wait, it is doing something. And then you see that we have the possibility to control the preview as we done before, but I had a crash, so I restarted the scene. So other things useful for the moment, you see that we have a lot of control there about the illumination and the secondary illumination, and I'd like to see something you can use, and that's the possibility to have a preview in viewport and to control the shape. You see that there we have the shape about every single particle there, so how the volume around the particle will be shaped. An important thing is that we have the possibility to preview something inside the viewport. The first preview is just the particle, so you see show particle only, and we see just the particles. The second one is show shapes as wireframe, and you see that we have a preview of the volume just to understand the scale of the volume around the particles. The third one is show shapes shaded. So you see, we see the particle volume as a sphere, a shaded sphere inside the viewport. And the last one is the show shapes with noise. So we see a real preview with the noise we have inside the plugin. So we have an interesting preview about what we'll see inside the rendering there in viewport, and that's really useful. Other interesting things is the visible. You see that we have this parameter set to 1000, and this one will control the amount of particles, volume particles that will be visible. You see that now we have a low number, but if we have a lot of particles, we can decide how many will be displayed. Obviously, that's just for the display and not for the rendering. Let's set it back to 1000. Then you see that there, let's go for the preview. You see that there we have the possibility to choose the shape. We have a box, for example. So you see we are using boxed volume around the particle. Or we have a cylinder. So we are using cylinder shapes to control the particles. Let's go back to sphere. That's the best things. You see that there we have the scale. We can control it, and obviously we have also the possibility to control the scaling at the beginning and at the end. So you see that there, for example, we have the possibility to control there the scaling with some effects. So for example, I can control there the graph and check how the distance will control the scaling. And if you see, now we have a different scaling. Let's try to have a really low value. So let's zoom there, and we set this one really low, let's say 1, and this one at the end we say that the scaling is 15. Let's set to visible, and you see that now we have a really low scaling at the beginning and a really huge scaling at the end. Let's go back inside the FX editor. Obviously this one is too low. Let's say, for example, 3. And you see that now it is better. So we have smoke visibility there and really big smoke later. Obviously we have other tools there, but we'll see it in a future tutorial. So let's close. And now if we render, obviously it's used a new scaling we have. So you see that we have bigger stuffs there and little volumes there. Let's see, for example, what happens if we render this frame. And you see that we have huge particles, volume particles there, and really tiny particles there. So we just see some stuff about the shape, and you see that we have also the possibility to control the squash of the particles, and you see that we have also other control over the particles there. Some stuff are useful all the time. For example, the MLN percentage is just when you use the hemisphere as particle shape, and we'll see how to use it. You see that there we have also the regularity. The regularity is visible there because you see that we are using a really precise shape of the volume if we have the regularity set to 100. And if it's set to 0, you see that we are using a really not regular shape. Let's go, for example, to 75, and let's see is too much. Let's go to 50, and you see that it is not bad. Maybe we can go for 40. Okay, then you see that we have the squash as we saw before, and we can also see with the squashing set to there that we have also the possibility to rotate the particles, and we'll see how to use the rotation and how to use also the particle rotation inside the particle system. Then you see that we have also the possibility to use the particle scale, the particle orientation, and the scratching done by the speed. So if the speed is higher, the particle will be more stretched, and this will be a really interesting effects we can have. So you see it is using the speed. Let's remove this one. Let's remove the squashing. And we saw how to control the scaling of the particles, how to control also the quality there. And another things I like to introduce is the possibility you see to control the turbulence that is creating the noise inside the volume. Let's go at full screen. You see that we have there the possibility to choose between a lot of things. We have the possibility to control the noise in a special way. We have, for example, the fireball and the tendril, and we have the type. You see that this one, the regular, is the basic noise, and it works in the same way it works for the shaders and the material with a noise texture. And we have also the size and the density and the detail. So the size is interesting because we see the noise scale we are using inside the rendering. And for example, you see that now it is really, really little. Let's go, for example, at 5. Let's see what happened. And you see that the scaling is not bad. Let's go to see what happened with the turbulence as we are using before. You see that we have more detail than before. And we have also, for example, the fractal one. So you see it's a different way to render, and we can go back there and we can have less regularity, for example. So you see we have more complex detail there. We can go back there and we can scale more the noise, and you see that we have more detail over the smoke. And obviously also the for example, the scale can be adjusted with the distance. So we can set again as an effect the emitter distance, and we can say that at the beginning we have, for example, a scaling of 1, and at the end we have a scaling of 8. So the effects will be scaled depending on the distance. So you see that there we have more detail, and there we have less detail because the smoke is coming to be real big. And we have the density, and you see that the density is the density of the effects, and it continues to be really fast. And that means that we can have a really high density, so we can create really pyroclastic effects. Obviously there it seems foam because we are not working in the right way with the smoke detail and all the other parameters. But also this parameter can be animated, and we can use again the same effects, I mean the meter distance, and we can say that at the beginning we have a huge amount of density, let's say maybe 60, and at the end we have 0, so we'll have no density. So you see that there is really dense, and then it is a low density. Let's see what happened. And you see that there is more dense, and there it is coming to be less dense. We can control the scaling, and I like to have a bigger scaling at the end. So you see it's bigger there. So you see that the smoke it's becoming to be really, really big. Okay, you see that we have also the fall-off. The fall-off is the fall-off on the edge of the single volume. You see that there we have no fall-off. Then we have the possibility to have a linear fall-off and a cubic fall-off. So you see that the fall-off on the edges of the volume will be more visible or less visible. Let's see, with none, we have this rendering. Let's make a copy. And with linear, obviously the fall-off will be linear over the distance from the center of the volume to the edge, the outer edge of the volume. And you see that some differences, are visible. You see, for example, there. Let's see with cubic. The fall-off is higher, so you see that there the smoke is really as a single volume, it seems, and there we see more density around the single volume. So we have a control also on the fall-off, and we have there, for example, the detail. So we can control the detail on the smoke. Let's see, with a really low, obviously, detail, we have no detail inside the noise. So you see we have a really, really low amount of detail, so we'll have a unique smoke. If we have a lot of detail, obviously we'll have more details over the smoke surface, and that's really useful to have more interesting things there. Obviously this one too can be animated, and this parameter is used also on the other kind of of noise type. So you see it's applied to all the other things, let's say, for the moment. So we have obviously there a lot of control, and it can be controlled, you see, in animation. It can be controlled depending on the shape of the particles, the speed of the particles, and all the other parameters of the particles. We have obviously other possibility there. You see we have, for example, the advanced fractal. That is a different way to use the fractal. You see that we have more detail actually, and it is different from the standard fractal we were using. We have also other things like, for example, the smoke. And you see that every single noise type can give us the possibility to simulate the different effects. We have also, for example, the cellular one and the 3D texture, where we can use a texture map to control the smoke. So we have a lot of parameters that can be used. So we done a really brief introduction to see how we can work with Pyrocluster. Obviously this effects is not so good because we are not going in the right way the simulation, but it's useful to start checking how Pyrocluster works. And you see that without any kind of works, we are doing a really simple rendering, but it's not bad. We can change, for example, the background color to something more similar to a sky. So we can see the smoke over a sky color, and we can have, for example, more light power on the direct, trying to simulate the sun. Let's try with 1.5. So you see we have more light in there and less light in there. And we can see also what happened from other point of view. We can see, for example, from there, just to see how it is illuminated. And you see that obviously the quality actually is strange because we are not working in the best way to control the smoke and to control every single parameters. But we have a lot of possibility to control how it looks. You you see that the shadows there are really visible because we are using just one light from this part, from this point of view, to control it. But you see that it is really fast in any condition. So it's really interesting to see how to play with this particle and with the Pyrocluster. So I saved the scene so you can just play with the basic feature we checked. Obviously, we continue to talk about Pyrocluster, and we'll start to use it to create really complex stuff as clouds, for example, rockets and meteors, a lot of things. So we'll do really interesting things with it, and we'll try to use it in the best way, and we'll see also how to use it with mental ray and the final render. So for the moment, that's all, and I hope to see you back on Max Cookie to check for more tutorial coming from cgcookie.com. Bye.